You arrive at Rome in the quiet of early morning when the light's still soft and the city seems to hold its breath before the full weight of the day begins. You do not enter a ruin, you enter a presence. Before you, the stones are silent, and yet they seem to remember everything. Empires have marched here, citizens have argued here, generals have been praised, cursed, feared, and forgotten here. And now, as you take your first steps forward, you begin to feel that Rome is not only a place you visit, it is a place that still watches those who come to see it. You walk slowly, and the city rises around you in layers. Not one Rome, but many. The Rome of shepherds and kings, the Rome of senators and soldiers, the Rome of emperors who believed they could command the world, the Rome of crowds, of markets, of prayers whispered at household shrines, of triumphs shouted through the streets. Every path before you seems to lead not only into the city, but deeper, into time itself. You notice how the ground changes beneath your feet, how the broken stone and worn road seems shaped by generations of movement. You imagine sandals striking the earth, wheels rattling over the pavement, merchants calling out, magistrates hurrying past, and somewhere in the distance, the murmur of a people convinced that their city stood at the center of history. And perhaps that is the first thing Rome asks you to understand. This was never merely a city of buildings. It was an idea built in stone. It was power arranged into streets and temples. It was order, ambition, law, violence, faith, memory, and spectacle all gathered into one place. As you step further in, you are not simply looking at the past. You are walking into one of the great human stories. You climb toward the Palatine Hill, and as you rise above the lower ground, the city begins to explain itself. Below you lies the curve of the Tiber, slow and brown, carrying light across its surface. Around you, the hills gather like natural walls, shaping a place that could be watched, defended, and remembered. Before Rome was a power, it was an advantage. Before it was an empire, it was a settlement placed with care by geography and then enlarged by human desire. Here, as you look out, you are standing in the world of origins where history and legend are bound so tightly together that neither can be fully separated from the other. The Romans told themselves that their city began with Romulus and Remus, twin brothers born into danger, set adrift, saved, and raised under the protection of a she-wolf. It is a story filled with violence, rescue, rivalry, and destiny. One brother would die. The other would found a city. Whether or not the tale is true in a literal sense matters less than what it reveals. Rome imagined its own birth as hard, contested, and marked from the beginning by struggle. From this height, you can understand why memory settled here. The hills offered safety. The river offered trade. Routes through Latium crossed nearby, bringing movement, goods, rumor, and opportunity. Small communities could grow into a town, and a town could begin to think of itself as something larger. The earliest Rome was not born in isolation. It took shape through contact, borrowing, and adaptation. Latin roots mixed with Sabine influence, Etruscan ideas left their mark on religion, symbols of rule, engineering, and urban life. Even at the beginning, Rome was learning by absorbing what surrounded it. The age of kings followed, though later Romans remembered monarchy with suspicion. Those early rulers, half historical and half shadowed by tradition, were said to have given the city much of its first form. They organized worship, shaped public authority, and oversaw the growth of a community that was slowly becoming more than a cluster of hilltop settlements. Temples rose, boundaries hardened, customs deepened into institutions, so as you stand on the Palatine, you are not simply looking at where Rome began. You are standing where memory and ambition of first shook hands, and where a small settlement on a few hills first started to imagine that it might become the center of a wider world. You descend from the height and move into the Roman Forum, the crowded heart of the Republic, where politics, law, religion, and ambition once pressed against one another from dawn until dusk. Here, the city no longer feels like a legend. It feels immediate, practical, alive. You can imagine the sound before you can imagine the buildings, footsteps on stone, traders calling, priests chanting, magistrates announcing decisions, and citizens gathering in knots to argue over news that might shape their lives. In this space, Rome learned to govern itself in public, and it did so noisily, confidently, and without apology. The Romans told of a final king driven out and a republic raised in his place, a system meant to prevent any single man from claiming royal power again. In theory, authority was divided and limited by custom as much as law. 2 consuls served at the top of the state, each checking the other. Magistrates held office for short terms. Assemblies gathered citizens to vote. The Senate, though not a legislature in the modern sense, advised, negotiated, and steadily shaped the decisions that mattered most. Rome did not abolish hierarchy. It redirected fear of kingship toward duty and honor. Yet the Forum was never a calm machine of balance. It was a battlefield of status, wealth, ancestry, persuasion, and class resentment. Patricians, the old elite families, claimed prestige and influence while plebeians pressed for protection, access, and dignity. That struggle shaped the republic from within. Over time, ordinary citizens forced concessions from the ruling order, winning tribunes who could defend their interests and laws made visible to all. The 12 tables displayed in public mattered because they made custom less secret. In Rome, law became a shared language, even when justice remained unequaled, incomplete, and sharply contested for all. As you move between the imagined buildings, you can sense how public life became a form of theater. Men rose to speak from the rostra, hoping to persuade, intimidate, or immortalize themselves. Victorious generals celebrated triumphs that linked military success with political advancement. Priests performed rites beside officials managing taxes, treaties, and disputes. Temples overlooked arguments about grain, war, debt, land, and citizenship. Nothing was neatly separated. Religion supported politics. Politics relied on family reputation. Reputation depended on service, performance, and display. The Forum gathered all these currents into one visible stage, where Romans watched power perform before their eyes. And that is why the Forum matters so deeply as you stand within it now, even in silence. This was the civic heart of a people who believed freedom required participation, argument, memory, and ambition held within rules. Those rules were imperfect. They favored the powerful. They could be bent, delayed, or exploited. But they gave Rome a language of citizenship strong enough to outlast generations. Here, power did not whisper. It shouted in public, demanded witnesses, and asked to be judged. The Republic was never peaceful, but in this crowded space, it learned conflict itself could become Roman strength. You leave the Forum behind, but in Rome, no road truly leaves politics for long. As you imagine The great roads running out from the city, straight across valleys, over rivers, through conquered hills and plains, you begin to understand that Roman power did not simply expand by courage alone. It expanded through organization. Stone by stone, mile by mile, Rome built the means to move men, messages, grain, taxes, and fear. A road was never just a road. It was a promise that Rome could arrive. At first, the struggle was close to home. Rome fought neighboring peoples in Italy, testing its strength against rivals who knew the same land, the same weather, the same desperate logic of survival. Victory did not always mean destruction. Often Rome drew the defeated into alliances, binding communities to its military system and extending influence without erasing every local identity. This was one of Rome's great political talents. It conquered, but it also absorbed. Enemies could become subjects, allies, even future Romans. Then came the wars that changed the scale of Roman ambition forever. Across the western Mediterranean stood Carthage, wealthy, maritime, experienced, and formidable. The Punic Wars forced Rome to think beyond Italy and to fight for a future it could not yet clearly see. You can almost feel the tension of those years, the fear that entered Roman memory when Hannibal crossed the Alps with his army and elephants, bringing war into the Italian peninsula itself. His victories shook Rome to its core. Towns wavered, armies died, confidence cracked, yet the city refused to yield. That refusal became part of Rome's identity. Defeat might wound it, but defeat would not end it. Rome rebuilt armies, extended resources, and wore its enemies down through patience as much as brilliance. In time, Carthage was beaten, then broken, and the Mediterranean opened before Roman power in a new way. With victory came treasure, slaves, tribute, and glory. Generals returned to the city crowned with honors. Processions displayed foreign wealth before Roman crowds. The world beyond Italy was no longer distant. It was being drawn into Rome's orbit. As you follow these imagined roads farther outward, you see that conquest changed the conqueror. Wealth gathered in elite hands, land was consolidated. Enslaved labor spread through farms and households. Military success became the path to political prestige, and provinces became sources of revenue as well as responsibility. Rome mastered logistics, discipline, and endurance, but every triumph abroad carried consequences back home. New victories fed old inequalities. So you see Rome's roads as arteries of command, carrying armies, orders, wealth, and memory. With every road it built, Rome tied another land to its future, and itself to empire. You turn away from the great monuments and step into the Rome that most people knew, not the Rome of speeches and triumphs, but the Rome of errands, labor, gossip, and survival. The streets narrow, balconies lean overhead, voices spill from open doorways. Somewhere bread is baking, somewhere water splashes into a basin. Somewhere a child cries, a mule complains, and a shopkeeper argues over the price of oil. Here, empire becomes ordinary life. On one street stands the domus of a wealthy family, spacious, ordered, and designed to impress. Its entrance opened to a world of painted walls, of private rooms, cool courtyards, and controlled beauty. Beyond it rises the insula, the apartment block of the many, crowded with workers, widows, migrants, artisans, servants, and families living close together above the noise below. In Rome, class was not an abstraction. It was visible in space, in comfort, in diet, in risk, and in the distance between one doorway and the next. You pass market stalls where vegetables, fish, cloth, lamps, and tools are bought in quick exchanges. You imagine the smell of olives, smoke, garlic, sweat, and damp stone. Food must be found, water carried or fetched, rent paid, clothes mended, favors remembered. Public fountains and aqueducts make city life possible, but daily life still demands effort. Beneath every grand claim Rome made about order stood endless human rebellion. You come at last to the baths, and the city seems to gather itself there. Men talk, negotiate, exercise, relax, and listen for news. The baths are not only for washing, they are places where the social world is rehearsed each day, where rank appears, softens, and reappears again. And yet beneath all this movement lies another truth. Enslaved people cook the meals, carry the messages, clean the floors, raise the children, and support the comfort of others. Rome's greatness rests not only on law and conquest, but on labor hidden in plain sight. To understand Rome, you must see both the marble and the dust, the wealth and the crowd, because the empire truly lived here first, in ordinary days. You return to the political heart of Rome, but the air has changed. The Forum no longer feels like a place where conflict can be contained by custom. The voices are sharper now, the factions are hard. The old ceremonies still continue, but beneath them lies a rising strain, as if the Republic has begun to exhaust the habits that once held it together. You can sense in every speech and every meeting that Rome is becoming too large, too rich, too unequal, and too ambitious for its old balance to survive unchanged. The first warnings came from men who tried to use the Republic's own institutions to repair its injustices. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus sought land reform, relief for the poor, and a response to the widening gap between elite power and citizens. They were not merely proposing policy. They were exposing the weakness of a system that could conquer the Mediterranean, but struggled to govern fairness at home. Their deaths, violent and political, marked a threshold. Blood had entered the language of reform. From there, the road darkened. Marius showed that military success could lift a man beyond aristocratic expectations, while Sulla proved that an army could be turned against Rome. Marching on the city shattered a boundary once thought sacred. It was no longer enough to win office, command legions, and claim honor. Now a leader could seize power by force and then rewrite the rules afterward. The Republic still existed in name, but precedent itself had begun to rot. Into that damaged order stepped Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, men whose partnership was built less on shared principle than shared advantage. Each needed the others for a time, and each expected to emerge stronger from the bargain. Caesar understood how glory in war could be carried back into politics. In Gaul, he won victories, created loyalties, and built a reputation too large for his enemies to ignore. When ordered to surrender command, he crossed the Rubicon instead. And with that decision, the crisis of the Republic became open civil war. You can feel the shock of that moment even now. Caesar advanced, his rivals fled, and the struggle spread across the Roman world. When he emerged victorious, he did not wear a crown, yet more and more power gathered around him. Honors multiplied, offices bent toward permanence. The Republic seemed to survive, but it survived under the shadow of one man. Then came the Ides of March. At the theater of Pompey, Caesar was assassinated by senators who claimed they were saving liberty. Yet murder did not restore the old order. It revealed how completely the old order had already failed. Rome did not return to republican harmony. It fell deeper into vengeance, alliances, betrayal, and war. In trying to kill a tyrant, Caesar's enemies helped destroy the world they meant to preserve. As you stand in the center of the city, you understand the tragedy. The Republic was not ended in a single stroke. It was worn down by inequality, ambition, fear, and the habit of solving political problems with exceptional men and extraordinary force. You are walking through the place where a republic learned too late that its laws were only as strong as the men willing to obey them. You step into a different Rome now, a city still haunted by civil war, yet determined to look serene. The scars of violence have not vanished, but they are being covered by order, ceremony, and stone. After years of assassinations, shifting alliances, and battles fought across the Roman world, many Romans no longer long first for liberty. They long for stability. Into that desire steps Octavian, the adopted heir of Julius Caesar, a man who survives rivals, defeats Antony and Cleopatra, and gradually transforms victory into a new political system. He is careful, patient, and shrewd. He does not announce himself as a king because Rome still distrusts that word. Instead, he presents himself as the restorer of the Republic, the first citizen, the guardian of peace. Yet, as you walk through the spaces shaped by his rule, you can see that power now gathers in one center. Offices remain, the Senate meets, elections still exist, but the balance has changed. Augustus, as he comes to be known, masters not only authority, but appearance. He understands that Rome must be persuaded as well as governed. Around you rises the architecture of legitimacy. Temples are renewed, forums are enlarged, monuments speak in marble where speeches once struggled in dust. The Arapaces, the altar of peace, presents an empire that imagines itself disciplined, fertile, sacred, and secure. Augustus famously boasts that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Whether literal or not, the phrase captures his achievement. He rebuilds not only structures, but expectations. Rome is taught to see order as beauty and beauty as proof of rightful rule. Peace returns, though it is not the old republican peace of competing citizens. It is imperial peace, guarded by armies, supported by administration, and embodied in one household. Morality laws, rituals, family imagery, and military success all serve the same purpose: to make the new system feel ancient, natural, and necessary. The empire becomes personal without admitting it fully. As you move through Augustus's Rome, you feel the genius on the cost of his settlement. He ends the cycle of civil war, gives the Roman world room to breathe, and establishes a model of rule that will endure for centuries. But he does so by preserving republican language while emptying much of republican independence. Rome is still Rome, but now its heartbeat runs through one man. You enter the Colosseum with the crowd, and at once the city seems to gather into a single breath. Stone rises around you in immense curves, tier upon tier, built to hold tens of thousands of eyes fixed on the sand below. Vendors move through the passages. Voices echo through the vaults. The smell of dust, sweat, animals, and oil hangs in the air. This is not merely entertainment. It is Rome displaying itself to itself. When the games begin, the arena becomes a language everyone understands. Gladiators step forward under the gaze of nobles, soldiers, merchants, laborers, and slaves. Animal hunts bring distant lands into violent view, Executions turned punishment into public warning. In the Circus Maximus, chariots race before crowds so passionate that faction and loyalty seem to shake the ground itself. Here, emotion is organized, directed, and shared. You begin to see that spectacle in Rome is political, even when it appears festive. Emperors sponsor games not simply to amuse the people, but reassure, distract, impress, and command affection. A ruler who appears before the crowd enters a ritual of visibility. He is judged by generosity, grandeur, and control. The people cheer, but they also watch. Power is never more exposed than when it seeks applause. And yet the thrill is real. The suspense, the noise, the roar of approval, the sudden silence before death or victory, all bind the crowd together. In Rome, amusement was never just amusement. It was discipline, wrapped in excitement, cruelty shaped into ceremony, and empire made visible in blood, stone, and sound. The arena teaches Romans what their rulers wish them to feel: awe at power, gratitude for generosity, fascination with violence, and belonging within a vast order that can turn fear into celebration before an obedient multitude assembled there. You pause before the temples and shrines of Rome, and the city reveals another layer of itself. Religion here is not hidden away from public life. It stands beside law, government, family, and war. A temple is never only a sacred place. It is also a declaration that Rome believes the gods favor its order. Priests read signs, magistrates perform rites, and households tend their own small altars. The divine is woven into a routine. You imagine incense lifting into the air, prayers spoken with care, offerings placed before Jupiter, Mars, Vesta, and countless other powers. Roman religion is practical as much as spiritual. It asks not only what people believe, but whether the proper rites have been observed, whether the city remains in harmony with forces greater than itself. To neglect ritual is to risk disorder, yet Rome is never closed to outside influence. As the empire expands, new gods, mystery cults, and foreign devotions enter the city. The pantheon itself suggests a world broad enough to gather many forms of reverence beneath one roof. Even the emperor is drawn into sacred life, honored in ways that blend politics with worship. Then, gradually, another faith moves through the same roads and cities that Roman armies once secured. Christianity begins at the margins, often mistrusted, sometimes persecuted, yet it endures, grows, and changes the empire from within. What was once a minority belief becomes a shaping force in public life. As you stand among Rome's sacred spaces, you sense a city in transformation. The Rome that once sought eternity through sacrifice and augury would one day bow before a different promise of salvation. And in that change, the meaning of the city itself would be altered forever, not erased, but carried forward into another vision of order, memory, and eternity. There, you come at last to the walls, and the mood of the city changes again. These are not the confident frontiers of a rising republic, nor the polished monuments of Augustan certainty. The Aurelian walls speak a different language. They speak of defense, urgency, and an empire that has begun to feel vulnerable in its own heart. Rome is still vast, still revered, still crowded with memory, but the city now protects itself against dangers once kept far away. During the 3rd century, emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed. Armies proclaimed rulers. Rivals marched. Frontiers buckled under pressure. Plague economic strain and repeated invasions weakened the old sense that Rome stood beyond ordinary history. Crisis no longer came as a distant rumor from the edges of empire. It arrived as a pattern, relentless and familiar. The state survived, but survival itself became a struggle. You sense that change in the very character of power. Emperors become more military, more mobile, more absolute. Administration grows heavier. Court ceremony stiffens. The center of gravity shifts eastward toward cities better placed to govern the empire's richest and most threatened regions. Rome remains the symbolic capital, but less and less the practical one. The world it built no longer revolves around it in quite the same way. Then come the shocks that later generations would remember with special dread. Gothic forces enter Rome in 410. Vandals sack it again in 455. Each sack is more than military damage. It is psychological revelation. The eternal city can be breached. The name of Rome still carries weight, yet weight is not the same as command. Institutions continue, bishops rise in influence, and the language of empire survives even as imperial power contracts. By the time the last Western emperor is deposed in 476, the process feels less like a sudden collapse than a long dimming. Offices remain. Titles linger. Habits of Roman government persist under two rulers. What disappears is not memory, but mastery. Rome does not vanish. It changes its meaning. As you stand beside these walls, you understand that endings are rarely clean. A civilization can lose authority before it loses prestige, and lose political control long before it loses cultural life. The city declines as a seat of empire, yet endures as symbol, church, inheritance, and dream. In these stones, you can feel an empire fading without ever becoming small to the world. You turn for one last look across Rome, and what remains with you is not only the image of ruins, temples, forums, and walls, but the feeling of a civilization that refused to be ordinary. Rome is gone, and yet it is not gone. Its armies no longer march. Its senators no longer debate the fate of provinces. Its emperors no longer sit at the center of the known world. And yet its language, laws, architecture, ambitions, and arguments continue to move through history long after the empire itself has faded. You leave with the understanding that Rome survived because it became more than a city. It became a model, a warning, a memory, and a dream. Later, states borrowed its symbols. Later, rulers borrowed its titles. Later, thinkers argued over its virtues and its crimes. The very idea of citizenship, of public law, of roads and administration, of empire as order imposed upon distance, all carry something Roman within them. And perhaps that is why your walk cannot end as simply as your footsteps do. Rome does not stay behind when you leave it. It follows in words, in institutions, in monuments copied across continents, in faith transformed through its history, and in the endless human temptation to build something lasting enough to defy time. So you step away slowly, carrying the city with you. You have walked through power and poverty, glory and cruelty, devotion and spectacle, ambition and decline. You have seen how a settlement on a few hills became a republic, how a republic became an empire, and how an empire became an inheritance. As you leave Rome behind, you realize that you are not leaving a dead world at all. You are walking out of one of the oldest conversations civilization still remembers even today.